Greetings, brothers and sisters. Lots of weird stuff to get to. Madonna and Britney and celebrities smoking toads. Yeah, that really happened. And bragging about it. Michael Avenatti sentenced 2.5 years behind bars for Nike extortion threat. The pugnacious lawyer rose to fame, representing Stormy Daniels before he made illegal threats to expose sports apparel giant. And remember, he had a bunch of stuff going on there. He was running for president. He was Stormy Daniels' lawyer. He was being celebrated by the Trump-hating media, and now he's going to jail. Really not much more to say about this, but, let the punishment fit the crime. Joe Biden to make good on his Afghanistan promise by August 31st. So he's been defensive about this.
Not send another generation of Americans to war in Afghanistan with no reasonable expectation of achieving a different outcome.
See, JoJo Magoo voted for the Afghanistan war, which was, all those wars were, similar to what's going on now, were about covering up for an economic reset and collapse back in 2003 and before that. Because, again, there needs to be distractions because the economy is failing because of the debt. And I've talked about this in past videos. But he voted for the Afghanistan war and then supported these other illegal wars under Bush and Obama that has destroyed countries all over the world and, have cost Americans lives and whatever it is, right? But it is something that they had to do to keep the economy afloat. But Afghanistan is a nightmare, and if you know anything about the history of Afghanistan, so many countries went broke after they invaded Afghanistan, like Alexander the Great or some people like that, right? Like there's a long history of empires collapsing after they went into Afghanistan. It happened to the Soviet Union. That's what brought them down.
Our military mission in Afghanistan will conclude on August 31st. The United States did what we went to do in Afghanistan, to get the terrorists who attacked us on 9/11 and deliver justice to Osama bin Laden, and to degrade the terror.
Yeah, neither of those things happened because it's the Taliban that are there, and they're going to take over control again once America leaves.
Terrorist threat to keep Afghanistan from becoming a base from which attacks could be continued against the United States. We achieved those objectives. That's why we went. We did not go to Afghanistan to nation build. And it's the right and the responsibility of the Afghan people alone to decide their future and how they want to run their country.
See, him saying that when you take down a government, well, you then are in the nation building business, because we've seen what's happened when governments are being taken down. It could be the most corrupt government. It can be, a dictatorship, whatever it is. But when you take a government down, it gets worse there. It's happened in Libya. Libya's a nightmare, right, because of what happened in the Gaddafi, taking down Gaddafi. It ends up being thug rule. And that's, any government collapses. And as bad as governments are, they're at least some, they bring order to chaos. And once you remove a government, then, like, if you just said, like, if you took out the main mob boss in a city, you would have chaos and havoc as the other mob bosses all vied for power. And you might have a divided type of situation there. So one unified thug rule is better than a lot of individual thugs, individual group thug, individual gangs vying for control and leadership, vying for control. It causes chaos and horrible living conditions. And so when America destroyed the Afghanistan government and the Iraq government and the Libyan government and the Egyptian government, this was the Arab Spring, and tried to do it in Syria and wanted to do it again in Iran, right? You're in the nation building business, right? You broke it, you bought it. And he was one of the people who broke it. He was in Congress, and then as vice president, he was in charge of, or he was a part of the Arab Spring, and now the Middle East is a complete mess and nightmare. We'll get back to that in just a moment, because some basketball news and coming out of France. And so I found the interview. I already did the first segment, but I want to add this to it. So I found the press conference. Here's Space Force. Space Force was Trump's idea, JoJo Magoo. And it was a good one. There's all the Army flags. And he's going to be asked some tough questions. And we know, when we'll see here, we know what happens when JoJo Magoo gets asked tough questions. He lashes out. This is why they hid candidate Magoo, because they didn't want him getting asked these kind of questions, because he can't handle them. And when he was vice president, he could. Something's happened in his psyche, in his psychological makeup, in his physical body, in terms of dementia and whatever else, that he can't handle tough questions. And so let's go here first.
We're ending America's longest war, but we'll always, always honor the bravery of the American patriots who served in it. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
So he's low energy. This is not a good moment for JoJo, since he was a big part of these wars. He's voted for them and advocated for them as a senator. He was a part of the Arab Spring as a vice president, right? And now he is leaving Afghanistan in a way that isn't cool, right? People are upset by the way the Afghanistan situation is.
Thank you.
Mr. President, do you trust the Taliban, Mr. President?
Is a Taliban takeover of Afghanistan now inevitable?
No, it is not. Because you have the Afghan troops have 300,000 well-equipped as any army in the world.
That means that we've given them a bunch of weapons and some training, but we know that Taliban will be running this country in no time. So this is going to be on. He knows this is happening, just like Kamala knew she was screwed when JoJo sent her to be the person in charge of the southern border. He knows he's screwed because he's going to be the one blamed for the failure of Afghanistan and the Taliban retaking control of it, because that's how politics and media works. Like, he should be blamed as a senator and as a vice president, but now he's inheriting this mess that he caused. An earlier version of JoJo Magoo caused pain. I talked about this, right? A future version, a more, mentally unstable version of JoJo Magoo, who now has to eat Afghanistan. Politically, this is going to be a disaster for him. And, he doesn't handle this very well here.
And an Air Force against something like 75,000 Taliban. It is not inevitable.
Do you trust the Taliban, Mr. President? Do you trust the Taliban, sir?
Is that a serious question?
It's absolutely a serious question. Do you trust the Taliban?
No, I do not.
Over the country to the Taliban.
No, I do not trust the Taliban.
So why are you handing the country over?
No, I don't trust the Taliban. Who told you? Who told you I trust the Taliban?
The U.S. responsible for the death of Afghans after you leave.
He's getting overwhelmed, and now he's like, oh, this is why they protected JoJo Magoo. This is why they didn't let him be a real candidate. They protected him with COVID. They protected him in all kinds of ways and didn't allow him to receive this kind of scrutiny because he loses it. He can't handle it. He's being overwhelmed here.
Mr. President, will you amplify that question, please? Will you amplify your answer, please, why you don't trust the Taliban?
It's a silly question. Do I trust the Taliban? No. But I trust the capacity of the Afghan military, who is better trained, better equipped, and more competent in terms of conducting war. Yes, ma'am.
he's like, no. And so he gets angry and he yells, and I'll come back to this because it goes on from here. You can see that his mood and demeanor has changed, and he can't handle tough questions. Like, he just can't do it. So this is a little bit younger JoJo Magoo from 2019 when he was candidate Magoo. Remember, he was challenged by some older, overweight gentleman who he called Fat as his name. He called the guy Fat like that was the guy's name, his new nickname for him. He challenged the guy to a push-up contest, and he just went off. And so this woman on NPR, in a very mild NPR voice, in a very, almost a whisper, in a very mild-mannered NPR woman, is asking him about that, and JoJo goes off on her.
About what happened the other day at your town hall.
Fake laugh.
Because you got a lot of attention for it. A man stood up and started throwing false allegations your way about your son.
They weren't false. They weren't the most well-researched allegations, but they weren't 100% false.
Hunter Biden and his work in Ukraine, and your work as vice president then in Ukraine. And you responded by calling him a damn liar. And then you challenged him to push-ups, and then you asked him for an IQ test?
No, he came along and he always said, he said he's entitled to do this. He said, you're too old. He said, you're too old. I can't vote for somebody as old as you. I said, okay.
That's not what he said. JoJo's memory of the something happened a couple days ago is not even accurate.
And he was challenging what kind of shape. So I kidded. I said, want to do a push-up contest?
You didn't sound like you were kidding.
I was joking. Look, I'm in pretty good shape.
Which is what Donald Trump says a lot. Hey, you can't take a joke. I was joking.
No. Don't compare me to Donald Trump.
But people did.
Look, so then he sticks his finger in her face. This is an aggressive move, right? Like, and look at what he gets all...
Hey, you can't take a joke. I was joking.
No. Don't compare me to Donald Trump.
But people
Don't
did.
do
At
that.
the town hall,
No, they didn't.
Yes, they did.
Well,
they said to me, the woman you met at the end...
Then he gets confused, right? He gets confused.
94-year-old Mary said to me, I was so disappointed in him. This is a direct quote. That is not the Joe I know. He sounded like Donald Trump in that clip.
Well, look, what Donald Trump says, he makes fun of people. He belittles people. He lies. I don't do any of those things.
You just did. You called the guy fat. You said he had a low IQ. You just did it. Like, we have video, and you're doing it all the time, calling people's questions ridiculous.
Period. The fact of the matter is, this guy stood up, and he was, in fact, lying. And I just pointed out, you're a liar. It's a fact. He lied.
Not a fact. And it's a fact that you're a liar because, like, we know already factually, you plagiarized other people's speeches and had to apologize for it. And you misrepresented yourself over and over again as candidate Biden and have lied countless numbers of times as a politician. And so, it's like you're saying you're a truth teller.
Period. And so, maybe I shouldn't have kidded with him about...
I just having some fun.
That, let's do push-ups. It's like I was out here in a parade, a 4th of July parade.
But I think...
You're selling access to the president just like he is. So
You're a damn liar, man. That's not true. And no one has ever said that? No one has proved that?
I see it on the TV.
You see it on the TV. No, I know you do. And by the way, that's why I'm not sedentary. I get up and no, let him go. Let him go. Look, the reason I'm running is because I've been around a long time and I know more than most people know. And I can get things done. That's why I'm running. And you want to check my shape on, let's do push-ups together here, man. Let's run. Let's do whatever you want to do. Let's take an IQ test.
So he's clearly angry, right? He snaps at the guy, and he challenges him to a push-up contest and an IQ contest, saying he's in better shape and he's smarter. And this woman's smiling. She likes it. She likes it over here. They didn't like it when Donald Trump did it, but they're clapping. Woo! Iowa, right? These Iowa Democrats.
Number two. No one has said my son has done anything wrong, and I did not on any occasion.
So when he's talking here, that's the time before Tony Bobolinsky. Remember that guy who was interviewed by Tucker Carlson? And he was JoJo Magoo's and his son and his brother, Hunter Biden and JoJo's brother's business partner with China. And he said they were completely corrupt and China bought influence. And then, of course, Hunter Biden has, since then, there's been revelations about Hunter Biden. His laptop came out. And, this is after this exchange with this guy. Hunter Biden recently wrote a book about his crack addiction and how he was addicted to crack for like 10 years. And he was making all kinds of money during that time. He impregnated a stripper. And so, but even back then, lots of people were saying that, Hunter had done things wrong. And like he clearly has. And so JoJo Magoo saying, no one said Hunter had done anything wrong. Yeah, lots of people did. And the media never pursued it. It was, basically criminal. I mean, it's stuff if the media looked into, they chose not to look into it. But in terms of, his mental competence, you can see he was a little bit sharper. He looked better. And that was only like 2 years ago. So even though he had deteriorated enough to challenge this guy, on a mental level, he had fallen off enough that he challenges him to a push-up contest, calls him fat, goes off on the guy, right? It's not like he was great back then, but he's gotten a lot worse. You can see it. He's sharper back then.
And no one has ever said it. Not
I didn't
one.
say you were doing anything wrong.
You said I set up my son to work in an oil company. Isn't that what you said? Get your words straight, Jack.
That's what I hear on MSNBC.
You don't hear that on MSNBC. You
Get your words straight, Jack. He's obviously triggered.
did not hear that at all. What you heard. Look, okay, I'm not going to get in an argument with you, man.
Well, I don't want to.
Well, yeah, you do, but look, fat, look, here's the deal.
He said, look, fat, look. He called him fat. So he's belittling the guy. He's angry, he's triggered, he's not joking around. And so he is, you see what happens when he gets challenged by this guy. And you see what happens when he gets challenged by this NPR woman.
He said he's entitled to do this. He said, you're too old. He said, you're too old. I can't vote for somebody as old as you. I said, okay. And he was challenging what kind of shape. And so I kidded. I said, want to do a push-up contest? I was joking. Look, I'm in pretty good
Which is
shape.
what Donald Trump says a lot. Hey, you can't take a joke. I was joking.
No.
But the point I
Don't
bring it up-
compare me to Donald Trump.
But people
Don't
did.
do
At
that.
the town hall I was
No,
just
they
at.
didn't.
Yes, they did.
Well,
they said to me, the woman...
And then he gets confused. So he shows an anger, not really understanding the social dynamics in two different situations, not being able to control his anger, and then confusion sets in, right? This is why they protected JoJo Magoo, but they can't protect him from this. So CNN and MSNBC News did a disservice to the American people when they allowed this to happen, right? When they didn't put JoJo out there on the campaign trail as candidate, for president, because they saw what happened in the primary. They knew when they had this guy out there, he was a disaster. And so, it's a lie. His whole presidency and candidacy is a lie because he showed mentally he wasn't up to the task and he should have withdrawn as candidate and the media should have hammered him, all of them, to make sure he didn't become president. But they protected him, and that's just effed up. But now, eventually they weren't going to protect him because people are forgetting about Donald Trump, and here he is, right? And I'm in the editing process, and I thought I should say this because I will get lots of comments from people saying, oh, why are you covering this? And that's not JoJo, that's a clone, or whatever it is, right? That these things are irrelevant, and they're not, because it's about perception. Also that he's a puppet and, he's not really the president, all these things that I talk about as well. But perception is everything in the world of what I call the show, because our government and our financial system are only going or moving along because of perception. The illusion that there is some, legitimacy and truth in it, and that it is sustainable and powerful and all these things. The president has power and the government is, not just a bunch of sort of criminals putting on some sort of Hollywood movie type illusion and the rest of it, right? And so as soon as people pull back the curtain, the system collapses. People say, oh, if we woke everybody up, yeah, the system would collapse because it's built on perception. And even if you don't believe in it, you still go along with it because you have to, you know. And so the perception of the presidency is important. And that's why they were saying we got to get rid of Trump, because Trump isn't acting presidential. He's destroying the perception of the presidency. He's destroying the brand of the presidency. And he's just acting like a reality TV star, billionaire brat. And he's not, tweeting in the middle of the night, picking fights. He's not acting in a, fake presidential sort of a way. And that's why they said, oh, we got to get rid of him. But JoJo Magoo is clearly not mentally up to the challenge. And by putting him in there, and now real stuff is happening, and, things like Iraq, where he's going to be, hammered on and criticized and things, and, rightfully so, and he can't take it. Like, he can't do it. And so you'll see that with the press conference here. He's just not up to the task, and perception is everything.
Thank you, Mr. President. Given the amount of money that has been spent and the number of lives that have been lost, in your view, with making this decision, were the last 20 years worth it?
You know my record. I can tell by the way you asked the question.
I'll show that again because it's very telling. I think that's Caitlin Collins of CNN. I'm not sure, but he says, I know you know my record because I tell by the way you asked the question, like she is throwing him a lifeline. And you'll see by the way he answers this question, because he wants deniability that he was ever in favor of the mess that Afghanistan became. But he's saying to her, oh yeah, you know my record, like she's giving him a lifeline. And he knows CNN will do that because they're just complete shill network. Let's see that again.
You know my record. I can tell by the way you asked the question. I opposed permanently having American forces in Afghanistan. I argued from the beginning, as you may recall. It came to light after the administration was over, lasted our administration. No nation has ever unified Afghanistan.
He didn't speak out publicly about it as a senator, right? Only after his Obama administration, some things came out where he was critical of the occupation of Afghanistan when it already proved to be a disaster, as a true political liar.
No nation. Empires have gone there and not done it. The focus we had, and I strongly supported, and you may remember, I physically went to Afghanistan. I was up in that pass where Osama bin Laden was allegedly escaped.
They had tea and they played some poker. It was a fun time.
Of harm's way. We went for two reasons. One, to
Bueller.
bring Osama bin Laden to the gates of hell.
What are you talking? Is that, you mean Washington, D.C. or Hollywood?
As I said at the time. The second reason was to eliminate al-Qaeda's capacity.
Wait a minute. Let's go back to that, because watch how proud he is.
Bring Osama bin Laden to the gates of hell. As I
Look at how proud he is. He's smiling with a smirk. He thinks he's nailing it.
said at the time. The second reason was to eliminate al-Qaeda's capacity to deal with more attacks in the United States from that territory. We accomplished both of those objectives.
Come on, bro.
Period. That's what I believed from the beginning, why we should be and why we should have gone to Afghanistan. That job had been over for some time. And that's why I believe that this is the right decision and, quite frankly, overdue.
Wow, they're coming in on him hard.
Mr. President,
people of Afghanistan?
Mr. President, thank you very much. Your own intelligence community has assessed that the Afghan government will likely collapse.
That is not true.
Can you please clarify what they have told you about whether that will happen or not?
That is not true. They did not reach that conclusion.
So what is the level of confidence that they have that it will not collapse?
The Afghan government and leadership has to come together. They clearly have the capacity to sustain the government in place. The question is, will they generate the kind of cohesion to do it? It's not a
The answer is no, because they already know it's no. You know it's no.
question of whether they have the capacity. They have the capacity. They have the forces. They have the equipment.
They've handed all this equipment over to the Taliban, is what he's saying. America has given millions of dollars, or billions of dollars perhaps, of weapons to the Afghanistan army that's going to be taken over by the Taliban, and the Taliban will now have those weapons. So, that happened.
The question is, will they do it? And I want to make clear what I made clear to Ghani, that we are not going to walk away and not sustain their ability to maintain that force. We are. We're going to also work to make sure we help them in terms of everything from food necessities and other things in the region. But there is not a conclusion that, in fact, they cannot defeat the Taliban. I believe the only way there's going to be, this is now Joe Biden, not the intelligence community, the only way there's ultimately going to be peace and security in Afghanistan is that they work out a modus vivendi with the Taliban and they make a judgment as to how they can make peace. And the likelihood there's going to be one unified government in Afghanistan controlling the whole country is highly unlikely.
Mr. President, thank you. But we have talked to your own top general in Afghanistan, General Scott Miller. He told ABC News the conditions are so concerning at this point that it could result in a civil war. So if Kabul falls to the Taliban, what will the United States do about it?
Look,
he's glitching out, right? He's, he just can't do it. He's gone.
you've said two things. One, that if it could result in a civil war, that's different than the Taliban succeeding, number one. Number two, the question of what will be done is going to be implicated, is going to implicate the entire region as well. There's a number of countries that have a grave concern about what's going to happen in Afghanistan relative to their security. The question is, how much of a threat to the United States of America and to our allies is whatever results in terms of a government?
You see, he can't come out and say, all right, yeah, we know it's going to be a shit show, like it's a disaster. So he's saying, well, we don't know. It might be something great happens. We don't know. We gave him the tools. We were successful, and we won. It was great. Everything was good. But now, we're going to leave it in their hands. Who knows what's going to happen? But they know what's going to happen. The Taliban are going to take over, and they're going to take over all those weapons that America has left behind, and they're going to destroy everything that America allegedly did in that country, and it's going to be worse than it was before. And Joe Biden is going to be the guy who, turned it over and let it happen. Like Trump campaigned and said he was going to do it and wanted to do it, but he realized that it was going to be, a disaster, and he didn't want to get blamed for it, so he didn't. So he prolonged it, kicked the can down the road, and now Biden has to do this. A big part of this is because we're broke. I mean, it's just we're hemorrhaging money over there. And so now it's just going to be a disaster, and Joe Biden knows he's got to eat it. And he's trying to pretend like, oh, no, there's still a chance. No, it's still a chance.
An agreement. That's when that judgment will be made.
Mr. President, some Vietnamese veterans see echoes of their experience in this withdrawal in Afghanistan. Do you see any parallels between this withdrawal and what happened in Vietnam, with some people feeling...
None whatsoever. Zero.
He's throwing up his hands in surrender. Zero. He doesn't see anything. No, there's no correlation between Vietnam and Afghanistan. I just talked to my brother about this, who was a Vietnam vet. He says, yeah, this is a lot like Vietnam.
What you had is you had entire brigades breaking through the gates of our embassy. 6, if I'm not mistaken. The Taliban is not the North Vietnamese army. They're not remotely comparable in terms of capability. There's going to be no circumstance where you see people being lifted off the roof of a embassy of the United States from Afghanistan. It is not at all comparable.
Wait, did you just make up the word comparable? It's comparable. It's kind of like the merger of comfortable and comparable. I like that word. I'm digging it, JoJo Magoo.
It is not at all comparable. It is not at all comparable. It is not at all comparable. I'll go the other side. Hang on a second.
Mr. President, how serious was the corruption among the Afghanistan government to this mission failing there?
Well, first of all, the mission hasn't failed.
That's great. Got to watch that again. He gets confused and he's like, wait a minute, fail. Wait, who said It's like everybody but you knows, JoJo Magoo.
Yet. There is...
Yet. It hasn't failed yet. It's going to fail, just not yet. We're not, I'm going to wait till, I'm not president anymore, and then we'll say, hey, it failed. Yet. Maybe Kamala will have to deal with it, but not yet.
Afghanistan government to this mission failing there?
Well, first of all, the mission hasn't failed yet. There is, in Afghanistan, and all parties, there's been corruption. The question is, can there be
a Disney type of a miracle? And the answer is no. This isn't, the Mighty Ducks. And so, all right, let's move on to there's still Britney stuff and Madonna stuff and Hollywood celebrities smoking toads. I haven't even begun to touch on the crazy stuff. John Dean, the guy from Watergate who spent jail time in Watergate, reveals the massive legal trap Trump accidentally set for himself. John Dean is now sort of a hero. He turned on Nixon, but still, he saw some jail time for his role in Watergate. And Keith Olbermann wrote this. This is the dumbest thing Trump has ever done. It's wonderful. I remind you from personal experience that when you sue somebody, you have to give a multi-day deposition on everything relevant to the topic. In this case, like your role inspiring the 1-6 coup, because that's why they're saying that Trump is banned from these, social media agencies. And so John Dean piped in, this should be nationally televised deposition. Please schedule it next week. Don't move to dismiss, which would be the normal move. Make him deal with the trap he created for himself. He will lose on merits. And so they want to have Trump answer deposition questions on the January 6th thing, and we'll see how that all plays out. I think this is just a big nothing burger. Trump isn't going to win, and they're not going to bag him, but, there's always people who are hopeful that things are going to change in one way or another, and they just keep on meandering down the long, slippery slope into the abyss. Newest Trump Tower, Barron shows off his 6'7" height in New York City. And so he just turned 15 years old, but he's a Trump giant. He looks a lot like that dude from the Goonies. There he is towering over Melania. He's carrying his mom's purse for her. Or what is that? What has he got there? He's got some kind of, I don't know. So that's somehow this guy grew. Well, he was shorter than his mom when Trump was sworn in as president. So he's grown a couple of feet in the last 4 years. Paris police frisk James Harden, detain rapper Lil Baby. And so this happened.
It's okay. I don't understand.
He's complaining like he would in a basketball game to the refs. I've seen him make those same kind of gestures in basketball games So apparently they got frisked on the streets of Paris because of some fashion show that they're there for. France has a huge immigration problem. They have basically open borders, France gripped by socioeconomic, medical, and cultural crisis. And it's because of the mass amount of migration that's happened because of these wars, the Middle Eastern wars conducted by America. So first understand this. This is Afghanistan. This is Iraq. This is Syria. And this is Libya. Libya is in Africa, but in the North Africa. And this is where the Middle East and all the oil is. You can see here Yemen and Oman and Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is all the, it's oil rich, right? There's all this buried oil, and they are able to grow poppies and opium in Afghanistan, which is even more valuable. And so Afghanistan is a rough place because of the terrain, the mountains, the deserts, and all these things. And it's located, in a very tumultuous type of area here. And for whatever reason, geographically, it has been sought after by many leaders, and countries have gone broke and collapsed. Empires have collapsed after invading Afghanistan, like there's some sort of curse on it or something, right? And so these are the countries that Egypt, to some extent, they messed around with Jordan in terms of the Arab Spring, and then they were going after Syria, and then eventually they wanted to get Iran, right? So America, I'm talking about the American military, went into Afghanistan because of, some bogus stuff that they, bogus reasons. And then from that, the opium crisis took off in America because the Taliban weren't allowing people to grow poppies and export opium. And the opium, when America came in, took over the government, the opium crisis, remember that, took off. And then they went into Iraq, which was, again, had nothing to do with the reason that they said. And all these things turned out to be, lied about, these wars. And then they went into Egypt. They did the sort of a police action in Egypt. They assassinated Gaddafi and destroyed the Libyan government. And then they went into Syria, and the Russians said no to that, right? And then, you had this, they've destabilized this whole area. They destroyed the governments in Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, Libya, and they tried to do it to Syria, and they eventually wanted to go to Iran. And here's France. And so what's happened is France has the France and Belgium up here. They have a more liberal borders. They have open borders. They're open to having immigrants come into their country. And so the people who have money and don't want to live in fear because their countries have been wrecked by American invasion, the people who live in these countries, and some of them in Africa, they can take a boat ride and get into France, right? And these other countries, not so much. They have stricter immigration policies. France doesn't. And so there's just this huge migration. And in 2005, when I went to India, I took a trip to India, and I flew through France, right? You have to, there's no direct flights that I know of, just in terms of fuel. Like a plane can't make it that far from America to India. India is halfway around the world. It's kind of an interesting story. So what happened was I flew out of Washington, D.C., and this is when they were tightening up security. So this is 2005, right? After, only a couple of years after, that big event. And the airport security was really tight. And I hadn't flown in years. And so I went into the airport in Washington, D.C., because I lived in Virginia. And I flew out of Dulles Airport. And there was, security was definitely tight, and it was, a new experience for me. I hadn't flown since those big events. And so I took a window seat, and some obese dude sat next to me in the back of the plane, and we took off, and I had to urinate, and the guy immediately fell asleep. And so I was like, I don't really want to wake the dude up. I didn't want to climb over him, right? And so I just was like, all right. It was like a a long flight, 5-7 hour flight to France from Washington, D.C. I said, I was coming into the airport, and I'm like, I'll, go to the bathroom and I'll get a cup of chai. I mean, I felt a little bit raggedy. The flight left like kind of early in the morning. So I really hadn't gotten a lot of sleep the night before, and I felt a little, I just want to eat something. I'm like, all right, I got a 2.5 hour layover in France, right? So we'll come into France, and I'll just, I'll get something to eat, have a nice cup of chai or whatever it is, right? And so we came in, and the plane exited. We exited the plane on the tarmac. There was no, you know how you go directly into the terminals. It didn't hook up to a building. We left by ladder, one of those staircases, not by ladder, but one of those, plane staircases. And we walked out into a bus, and it took us into like a holding facility. And there was all these people who are basically, there was the French people, but most of the people were like Muslim or some kind of, Arab type of people. And we were in this like basement building, and people are just yelling at us in French. like babies are crying, and it was like no air conditioning. It was like hot, and just, we're in the Charles de Gaulle airport in Paris, and I'm like, what is going on, right? Because, I heard the French were kind of rude, and they're just like screaming at us in French, and they had machine guns out. They had military there. And we went through this like, and I had no idea because everything's in foreign language. People are like, like talking to me like people who are there with me. And then there's the people who are French were yelling in French. I have no idea, like zero. I know no word, like it's not like a word. And then they, we went through like intense security, like way more intense than America. And I'm like, what's going on? Because the big events that had just happened in America and not here, and not in France. And I'm why is the security so much worse here? And there was all these immigrants coming into their country, and they weren't happy about it. And, so we went through this long process, and it took about 2 hours of my 2.5 hour layover. And so I had to basically O.J. Simpson it and run through the airport to get to my terminal because it wasn't, again, an English-speaking country. And so I literally, ran to my terminal where they were boarded. The plane had already been mostly boarded, and I was, one of the last people to board. And so I sat there, and the plane was pretty much empty. There wasn't that many people on the plane. It was about a third full. And so I'm sitting there, and now I'm like, oh, wow, I'll take another window seat because nobody's going to sit next to me. And so in the plane was, I thought I was the last person on. And all of a sudden this dude walks on, right? And there's an empty row before me and in front of me and behind me. And the guy comes and sits right next to me. Right? I'm like, holy shit. Like, I thought there was going to be where I could, move the armrests up and literally lay down and take when you're flying to India, it takes like a whole day. It's like 24 hours, right? Plus there's all the travel time. I lived, I think at the time, 3 hours away from the airport in D.C., and D.C. traffic is a nightmare. Like, there's always a traffic jam there. They call it the Beltway, and I've never driven into the Beltway, through the Beltway in Washington, D.C. without being a part of a traffic jam. It's just, there's too many cars and not enough road. And there's many cities like that. And so the whole process, ended up being like a 36-hour, trip. And so this guy sits next to me, and I had taken out one of my heartfulness books to read on the plane. And, there's that little, in front of the seat, there's that little elastic where they have magazines and barf bags and things like that. And I put the book in there so I could, I could get it out later easily where I wouldn't have to go on to my carry-on bag. And I, and the book's sitting there in the title. And the guy looks at me and goes, so you're going to see Master, right? You're going to see Master Chargy, who was pictured on the front of the cover of the book that I was reading. And I go, what, you a practitioner of the heartfulness system? He's like, yeah. And so it was his first time to India. So we had a nice conversation. And, I saw the guy multiple times in India. I kind of helped him get, the first time you come into India as being somebody from a Western country, it's a culture shock. And so, we got off the plane and it was like, 1:00 in the morning. The planes always come in late for whatever reason. And, getting to the ashram is kind of, it's an adventure, especially if there isn't like a big gathering or something going on. And so it was helpful to this, he was a new practitioner of the system that I had been to India 10 years before, and I knew a little bit about it. And it was my first time, going from, like, I got in at, I think, 11 o'clock at night, or, whatever it was, didn't get to the ashram till about 1. You have to go through immigration and all those things. And so getting a cab in a country that's, completely foreign to you is, it's an interesting ride. But anyways, what I learned from that trip was that France was a lot more concerned about security than America was. It was a lot tougher, getting through the airport security because they were having an immigration crisis because they had open borders. And all of these people from these countries, you see Libya's here now, and Libya hadn't been invaded back then, but it's even worse now. So you have you have Iraq and Syria that have been messed up, and these countries here that have had their governments taken away. The Arab Spring, Egypt and Libya, and they have a pretty short boat ride or plane ride to France, who has an open border, and France is overrun with immigration right now. And so that's why James Harden got frisked. And there's a lot more racism now in France because of all the, this is what happens when you have a country with open borders and you have another country or a, global movement, but mostly America, that destabilizes all these countries around you. And people want out of those countries because there's no rule of law there, right? They've taken down the governments. America has taken down the governments in all of these countries, and they have to go somewhere, and their best option, they think, is France. And they have, a huge impouring of people from this area, this destabilized area. Madonna supports Britney Spears. Slavery was abolished long ago. She's wearing a Tupac shirt with some kind of, I don't know what kind of lettering that is, in California. Here's her Instagram page. And she's just so pretentious. Like she's so just weird and pretentious. I mean, she's gotten worse as she's gotten older. Like she's got the worst Instagram page. And so, it's American flag here. 4th of July is a lie until we make it otherwise. Madonna's got her, her messages. She's got $860 million, so maybe she could actually use some of that money to make things better. But here's her Instagram story. And so, there's just this Paramount. She's got some kind of thing coming out in October on Paramount. And then it says this: give this woman her life back. She's a picture of, I guess, I don't know who this is, wearing a Britney Spears t-shirt. It must be Madonna. Slavery was abolished so long ago. Death to the greedy patriarchy that has been doing this to women for centuries. This is a violation of human rights. Britney, we are coming to get you out of jail. I don't know what that means. So then somebody had pointed this out. Britney says, while you were talking behind my back, feel free to bend down and kiss my ass. Okay, so I edited out my tattoo on my neck because I wanted to see what it would look like clean. And yeah, I like it better, so while you guys are talking behind my back, go ahead and kiss my ass, haters. You gotta look out for those haters. This isn't Britney. But a few weeks ago you said it's your favorite tattoo that we never get to see. Praying for July 14th to your Freedom Day. Baja Bah ha 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 ha. Is anyone really falling for this? This clearly isn't Britney. Britney is never this rude. Just know, free Britney. So what this is about is this right here, there's no neck tattoo. My grandma, what broad shoulders you have. Then Paris Hilton gives a few emojis here, and free Britney, free Britney. Britney's back. Free Britney. The back carried the entire the back that carried the entire pop music industry. I'm trying to know if she gave her consent to this picture. Where are the tattoos? No tattoo here. And so she has a tattoo that she talked about somewhere down here in Britney land. I don't know where it is. Here it is. Hot pink makes my tan pop. Have you seen the tattoo on my back of my neck before? Wherefore, question mark. It's Hebrew. It's a language written backwards, 4 exclamation points. It says, hey, shin, and means healing. It's my favorite tattoo, but ironically, you never see it. Multiple confused faces, and I believe that's 5 exclamation points. So here's the tattoo in question. So, it's always crazy in Britney land, right? And now Madonna, Madam Expiration Date, is trying to, get some play by joining in and being a Britney truther. Christina Hack met new BF Josh Hall after smoking toad venom. This is a wonderful headline. I have no idea who this is. I think this is a reality TV star. Don't tell me, don't care, don't need to know. But I guess toad venom, in this case, well, let's read this. Christina Hack. I met Josh when I wasn't in a state of fear or fight or flight. I had taken time off of social, hired a spiritual coach, and smoked a Bufu toad. Apparently, Bufu toads have DMT in them, which is just crazy, which basically reset my brain. I guess Bufu toads are brain resetters. Maybe we can get the economy to smoke one. And kicked out years of anxiety in 15 minutes. When we met this past spring, the synchronicities hit us so hard and fast that they were impossible to ignore. See, she kissed a toad and met a prince. She smoked a toad and met a prince. It turned into a prince. You see here's the toad in question, I believe. And I guess they have DMT in it. Just crazy. They're smoking toads now. Like, this is, what is happening? What is going on? There should be no toad smoking. Like, can't they make toad smoking illegal? Is it illegal? Like, what's going on? They got to crack down on this toad smoking. I felt immediately crazy protective over him and wanted to keep him for myself and get to know each other before the tornado media attention hit. We had a few solid months of us getting to know each other, and I love every second of it. So-called fame provides so many things, but it comes with a cost. A cost that can only be wiped out by toads. They build you up and they tear you down. What happens to the toads, too? Like, what do they do to the poor toads? These celebrities in their frickin' toad ways. When I saw a camera behind us at the airport, my heart started beating out of my chest, and my hands were shaking. And not for me, but for him. I know they dig, and I didn't ever want to see him stress over media stalking him and his families, which obviously has already begun to an uncomfortable degree. False narratives being thrown out around left and right. They go after everyone you and your family follow on social media and everyone who's in your inner and outside circle looking for dirt and drama. This is the life of a celebrity. This can only be cured by toads. That's partly why there's so many failed celebrity relationships. They turn new relationships into a circus. We decided what's in the past is in the past. We aren't looking at all the nonsense online. The internet and social are great for businesses or staying up to date on fam and friends, but also can be toxic. And let's be real, pretty fake. I may be a bit crazy and I'm definitely not perfect, but I will never live my life based on other people's judgments or opinions. Like, I have never heard of this person before. And this is what she says she's experiencing as like a C or E, a D or F celebrity, right? We pride ourselves on never judging others and always wanting others to be happy, and we wish others would have the same respect. Josh doesn't have social media, but I want to thank him for whisking me away on a romantic tropical vacation he planned entirely on his own. He was able to do this himself. And so, yes, another relationship, and guess what? I'm 38, and I'll do what I want. You don't need to explain anything to anyone. Enjoy. Well, I think she's got some answering to the Toad's family. I think she owes the Toad's family some sort of explanation. Live your life, girl. You're beautiful and deserve to find happiness. And guess what? It's none of our business. What is a boo-foo toad? 135 replies. God is spiritual, Jesus is love. Sounds like she has both. Acupuncture works great for anxiety. It sure helped me. I guess this is the person's Insta goal. And I don't know. Okay, I just want to wrap this up. I ended up, shooting another segment on the JoJo press conference, so this video ended up being a lot longer, and I forget what I was going to say here at the end. There was a lot in there. But I will say this, because I've said this before, that people think you can take a substance and have spiritual experience. Like she said, it wiped out 15 years of anxiety with one smoking of one toad, right? Again, like, what about the toad? Like, are you a vegan? But any of these things, ayahuasca or DMT, any of these types of drugs people use to have spiritual experiences, peyote, it flies in the face of true spirituality, because like when the heartfulness meditation, the idea is that you forget your body. In fact, there is a type of yoga, I think it's called Vipassana. I'm not sure. It's not important. If you know, you don't need to tell me. But what it is they sit in uncomfortable positions, or they sit on the floor for like 12 hours. And the pain of your body is supposed to help you eventually get absorbed in the meditation. And so, it's a physical thing, right? Where in the heartfulness system, you just sit comfortably with the idea that your body is, you're forgetting about your physical life, you're forgetting about your body, you're forgetting about distractions and thoughts and problems, and you're slipping in and connecting to God on a deep level, going internally, you're internalizing yourself and focusing on your heart. And there's cleaning to help remove the thoughts and the impressions and the things that are there that are blocking your path. And then the transmission helps you settle in and go into a deep state of meditation. And people can go into samadhi, which is in other forms of yoga, like in Patanjali's 8 limbs of yoga, samadhi is the last limb. It's the last stage of yoga that you might be able to achieve after 30 years. But it's just the start in the heartfulness system. In fact, samadhi is, it makes you feel good. There's 2 states of samadhi too. Samadhi is where you go into like a sleep-like state, but you're not really sleeping, and you come out refreshed and you feel good and you connect to God at a deep level. But in the Sahaj Marg method, you can go into samadhi and still be consciously aware. You're awake, right? Samadhi is like a sleep-like state, but this is a waking samadhi where you can be aware of what's going on, but still be in this deep spiritual state. But to achieve real spirituality, you don't need substances. In fact, they're going to cause a problem. Any sort of hallucinogenic or things, LSD, all these things that people take to get into a spiritual state, is something that'll ultimately block, and maybe you'll have a bad trip or a bad experience. Whereas the subtle nature of the heartfulness system, where there's no hangover, there's no, negative effects of, drugs and alcohol and, things like that, but you can still change your, mental state and your emotional state, your feeling state, and all these things in a subtle way. And it's done in a natural way where you're forgetting about your body and you're connecting to your spiritual side, your subtle bodies, God, your soul, and these other things. And so, these things are achievable. And I don't, why in the world would someone smoke a toad? You want to smoke a toad? No, thanks. Yeah, I'm cutting back on the toad. Well, anyways, only spirituality will save this world. It's paramount, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.